They say one mistake can change your life forever. For her, it wasn't a crime, it wasn't betrayal, it was just coffee. Hot, bitter, and spilled on the wrong man. The man who ruled the city's underworld. The man whose name people whispered in fear. The Mafia Boss. If you think spilling a drink is harmless, wait until you see what it cost her. Stay until the end. Let us know where you are watching from and kindly drop a comment and hit the like button, and if you have not subscribed, please do. Let's go back to the story. The cafe buzzed with lunchtime chatter, waiters rushing between crowded tables. She struggled with the tray in her hands, her swollen belly slowing her down. Every step was heavier than the last, but she couldn't afford to lose this job, not when hospital bills loomed over her like a noose. Then she saw him, a man in a tailored black suit, sunglasses resting on the table beside him. His presence silenced the air around him. Even the clinking of cutlery seemed to stop. Two bodyguards stood close, their eyes sweeping the room like hunting hawks. Her hands trembled as she placed the cup of steaming coffee before him. One slip, one shake, and the cup tilted. The hot liquid cascaded over his crisp white shirt, darkening the fabric. Gasps filled the cafe. She froze. I'm sorry, sir. Please, it was an accident. The man rose slowly, his chair scraping the floor like a blade unsheathed. His jaw tightened, his icy eyes locking on her. The cafe went dead silent. Before she could step back, rough hands grabbed her arms. The boss's men. The tray clattered to the floor. Tears blurred her vision as panic surged through her chest. Please, I'm pregnant. I didn't mean to. The boss wiped the coffee from his shirt with a white handkerchief. His movements were deliberate. Calm. Too calm. The silence in the room was suffocating, broken only by the muffled sob in her throat. Then he looked at her. His gaze carried no mercy, only cold calculation. He folded the handkerchief, slid it into his pocket, and said in a voice as smooth as steel, "Punish her." The word hit her like a hammer. The men dragged her toward the door, her cries echoing through the cafe. No one moved, no one dared speak. Outside, the rain poured as if the heavens themselves mourned her fate. And the Mafia Boss? He simply sat back down, picked up his untouched coffee, and waited for her screams to begin. The rain outside poured like a curse from heaven. Two men dragged her out of the cafe, their grips like iron shackles digging into her arms. Her screams bounced off the walls of the narrow alley, but no one dared to interfere. Bystanders lowered their heads, pretending not to see, pretending not to hear. "Please," she cried, one hand instinctively pressing her swollen belly. "I'm pregnant. I didn't mean it, I swear." Her words were drowned by the storm. The Mafia Boss stepped into the rain moments later, his black tuxedo untouched by even a single drop beneath the umbrella held by his bodyguard. His cold eyes followed her struggle, as if she were nothing more than a street rat daring to breathe in his world. One of the henchmen pushed her down. Her knees slammed into the wet pavement, a cry of pain tearing from her lips. Mud smeared her uniform, soaking into her skin. Another strike landed against her back, forcing her forward. The tray she once held, her only tool of survival, lay broken in the gutter. The boss lit a cigar, the faint orange glow casting shadows across his face. He said nothing, just watched as blow after blow rained down on her fragile body. Each hit stole her breath, each kick threatened the life inside her. She coughed, choking on rainwater and sobs, clawing at the ground as if she could dig her way out of this nightmare. "Enough," the boss finally said, his voice calm, almost bored. But there was no relief in the command. It only meant the men would change their method. One grabbed her by the hair, forcing her face upward toward the man who held her fate. Her swollen eyes locked with his. "Please, I beg you. My baby." The boss blew smoke into the storm, his expression unreadable. "Next time, know your place." He turned to leave, his polished shoes splashing through puddles as though she didn't exist. The men threw her to the ground like discarded trash. Her body trembled, soaked, and broken. She tried to stand, clutching her stomach. A sharp pain tore through her, unlike anything she had felt before. Her vision blurred, the sound of rain mixing with her ragged breathing. She staggered, then collapsed, her hands pressing desperately against her belly as warm liquid rushed down her legs. The last thing she saw before darkness swallowed her was the glowing tip of his cigar, fading into the distance. And then she realized her water had broken. Her baby was coming. Right here. Right now. In the freezing rain. The world came back to her in fragments. A harsh white light above. The sharp scent of antiseptic. The muffled echo of voices she couldn't place. Her body ached, as if it had been broken into pieces and barely stitched back together. When she turned her head, she saw him. Not the Mafia Boss, but him, her child. A tiny, fragile boy wrapped in thin, faded hospital cloth, breathing with a weak, shallow rhythm. Tubes and wires surrounded his crib, each beep of the monitor reminding her how close she had come to losing him. Tears blurred her vision. She reached out, her hand trembling as she touched his tiny fingers. "My baby." Her whisper cracked. "I'll protect you, no matter what it costs." But protection came with a price tag she couldn't afford. A nurse entered the room, her face tight with pity. "He was born premature," the nurse explained. "He needs constant monitoring, treatment, and that means money." Her heart sank. Money. Something she never had enough of. She worked tables just to survive, and now the very life she had fought for hung in the balance of hospital bills she could never pay. Her lips trembled. How much? The number hit her like a bullet. More money than she could earn in a year, maybe 2. Her stomach clenched, despair flooding her veins. I don't have it. Please. Can you help me?" The nurse shook her head slowly, almost apologetically. "Without payment, we can't continue his care. You have a few days, maybe less." Her world crumbled. She buried her face in her hands, sobs shaking her frail body. No family to turn to, no friends to borrow from. Alone, just her and her child against a world too cruel to care. The room spun with despair, until the nurse's next words sliced through the silence like a knife. The nurse glanced nervously at the door, lowering her voice. "There is someone. He came here. He asked about you, about the baby." She lifted her head, eyes wide with fear. "Who?" The nurse hesitated, then leaned closer. "The man you spilled coffee on, the Mafia Boss." Her breath caught in her throat. Why was he here? Had he come to finish what he started or to take the only thing she had left? The door creaked open, slow and deliberate. The nurse froze, her hands clutching the chart as though it might shield her. He stepped in, the Mafia Boss, impeccable in a fresh black tuxedo, the faint scent of expensive cologne cutting through the sterile air. 2 of his men flanked him, shadows with guns hidden beneath their coats. Her heart thudded in terror. She clutched her fragile baby closer, her arms trembling as though she could shield him with nothing but love. His eyes scanned the room, cold and assessing, before they landed on her. He didn't look at the infant with wonder or pity, only calculation, like a hunter sizing up prey. "You're awake," he said, voice smooth, almost gentle. But there was no kindness in it, only the echo of menace. "I wondered if you'd survive." She tried to speak, but fear locked her throat. Only a broken whisper escaped. Why are you here?" The corner of his mouth twitched into the faintest smirk. He stepped closer, his polished shoes silent on the hospital floor. "Do you know what I hate more than anything?" he asked, leaning just enough that his shadow covered her and the child. "Being disrespected. And you spilled coffee on me. In front of everyone. You cost me dignity. Time. Power. That is an inconvenience I do not forgive lightly." Her lips trembled. I didn't mean..." His hand shot out, grabbing the rail of her hospital bed. The sudden clang made her flinch, clutching her baby tighter. His eyes burned into hers. "Intentions don't matter in my world. Actions do. and actions have consequences. The baby whimpered, as if sensing the storm in the room. He glanced at the child, then back at her. "You owe me." Her body went cold. "Owe? You?" He straightened, brushing invisible dust from his sleeve. "For the insult. For the inconvenience. For wasting my time with this hospital visit." His gaze swept to the wires and machines keeping her baby alive. "And now, for the debt you cannot pay." Her chest tightened with panic. She understood. The hospital bills, the impossible amount the nurse had whispered about. He had seen it too, and he was turning her desperation into shackles. I have nothing," she stammered, tears streaking down her face. "Please, I beg you." He leaned closer again, his voice dropping to a chilling whisper that seemed to freeze the air around her. "Oh, you have something," he said, eyes glinting with cruel amusement. "Your life, your loyalty, your very soul. And I will take them." His words cut like a blade. Then he delivered the order that sealed her fate. "You will repay me, in ways you cannot refuse." The Mafia boss's words haunted her long after he left her room. "Repay me in ways you cannot refuse." They echoed in her head as she clutched her newborn to her chest, rocking him with trembling arms. Fear was no longer just a shadow. It was her entire world. 2 days later, the hospital released her. Not because she had healed, but because bills had piled too high. Nurses whispered apologies, but their eyes avoided hers. The moment she stepped outside with her fragile baby, the city felt colder, hungrier, more hostile. She dragged herself to the only place she had left, her tiny rented room in the poorest part of the district. The cracked walls, the leaky ceiling, the narrow bed. It wasn't much, but it had been theirs. Now, it was supposed to be her last refuge. But when she pushed the door open, her heart shattered. The room was destroyed, furniture overturned, clothes ripped apart, even the thin mattress sliced open like it held secrets. Her few belongings, gone. The small savings she had hidden in a tin can, stolen. On the wall, in bold red spray paint, one word screamed at her. Debt. She sank to her knees, clutching her baby tighter. The child whimpered, sensing her despair. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, "Why won't they let us live? What did we ever do to deserve this?" But deep down, she knew the answer. The boss hadn't just punished her for spilling coffee. He was making an example of her, showing her that every corner of her life belonged to him. She wasn't free. She was chained, not with iron shackles, but with poverty, fear, and helplessness. Days blurred into nights as she struggled to survive. She begged for food, took scraps from the street, and wrapped her baby in rags to keep him warm. Every cough from his tiny chest stabbed her heart like a knife. And then, one night, the nightmare grew darker. Exhausted, she fell asleep beside him on the creaking bed of a shelter she had stumbled into. For the first time in days, her eyes closed in fragile peace. But when she woke to the sound of silence, her arms were empty. Her heart lurched. She looked around frantically, blankets thrown aside, panic rising like fire in her throat. The crib was gone. The baby, her baby, had vanished. She screamed into the night, her voice echoing through the walls of poverty. Somewhere in the darkness, a door creaked shut. Her child had been taken. Her scream cut through the night, raw and wild. She tore through the shabby shelter room, flipping blankets, ripping open closets, searching corners as though her baby might still be hidden there. But the truth was undeniable. Her arms were empty. Her baby was gone. She stumbled into the streets barefoot, her voice breaking as she cried his name into the dark alleys. Strangers watched, their faces blank, pretending not to hear. The city had no mercy for broken mothers. Hours blurred into dawn. By morning, she was knocking on doors, begging for answers. "Have you seen him? Please, he's just a baby." Her voice cracked with desperation, but most doors slammed shut. Whispers began to follow her. Rumors that a baby had been seen in the hands of men who belonged to the underworld. That whisper led her into darker corners of the city she had never dared to step in before. The docks reeked of salt and rust. The alleys stank of rot. Graffiti marked walls like warnings, and shadows moved where sunlight couldn't reach. She stumbled past drunkards, gamblers, and women with hollow eyes, clutching a picture she had drawn on scrap paper, her baby's tiny face. At a gambling den, a scarred man sneered. "Babies don't last long in this city. Best forget 'em." The words nearly shattered her, but fire burned in her eyes. Forgetting was not an option. He was her blood, her soul. By nightfall, she was collapsing in exhaustion, her feet blistered, her throat raw. Just when despair threatened to swallow her whole, she saw it. At the corner of a rain-slicked street, headlights flashed. A sleek black car purred like a predator waiting to devour. And then, her breath froze. One of the Mafia Boss's men stepped into view, his arm cradling a bundle wrapped in cloth. The shape was unmistakable. Her baby. Her knees buckled, but rage gave her strength. She pressed against the wall, heart pounding, watching as the man opened the car door. The baby whimpered faintly, the sound piercing through the chaos of the city like a lifeline. Her eyes widened in horror and fury. There was no doubt now, her child was in their hands. And as the black car door slammed shut, she realized the nightmare wasn't over. It was only just beginning. Her legs carried her without thought, chasing the black car through the twisting veins of the city until it vanished behind the iron gates of a mansion too large for human hearts. She collapsed against the bars, chest heaving, tears mixing with rain. Inside, she saw him, the Mafia Boss. He stood on the marble steps like a king carved from shadow, his eyes calm, as though he had expected her. "Where is he?" she screamed, voice raw. "Give me back my baby." The guards moved, but the boss raised a hand. Silence fell. He stepped closer, his presence alone pressing her against the iron. His voice, low and steady, carried through the storm. "You come demanding something, when you owe me everything." Her hands clutched the bars until her knuckles whitened. "I'll do anything. Please, just let me hold him again." For the first time, a flicker of amusement touched his lips. He studied her face, her tears, her trembling body still bruised from the beating. Then he leaned close, his words deliberate and sharp. "Anything you say? Then listen carefully. You will serve me. Not for a day, not for a week, but until your debt is erased. You will clean my floors, pour my wine, obey without question. You will be nothing more than a servant in my house. Do this, and the child breathes under my roof. Refuse, and he disappears forever." Her world tilted. His words were not an offer. They were chains wrapping around her throat. But what choice did she have? Tears streaked her cheeks as she whispered, "I'll do it. I'll do whatever you want. Just don't hurt him." The boss straightened, his smirk carved in stone. "Good girl. Welcome to your new life." The iron gates opened and she stumbled inside, past stone lions and armed guards, into a world of luxury that smelled of blood. Every hallway dripped with wealth. Chandeliers glittered above, marble stretched beneath her feet, and portraits of cold-eyed men stared from the walls. But all of it faded when a faint cry reached her ears. She turned sharply. Down the corridor, through a half-open door, she glimpsed a nursery. Gold-trimmed cribs, silk blankets, shelves of toys, a world of luxury her child could never understand. And there he was, her baby, lying in the crib, tiny hands stretching toward the mobile that spun above his head. Safe, but not hers. Her heart ached as guards blocked the doorway, forcing her away. She could see him, so close she could almost touch him. But she wasn't allowed to step inside. Her baby lived in luxury now, but out of reach behind the cruelest bargain she had ever made. The nursery door had closed, but her chains had only opened. The next morning she woke to the sting of commands. A maid shoved a bucket into her hands. "Scrub the floors, every inch, and don't think of slacking. The boss sees everything." From dawn till dusk, she worked like a shadow. Mopping, polishing silver, carrying trays so heavy her arms ached. The staff sneered, whispering behind her back. The boss's little charity case. Debt slave. Pathetic. Her knees blistered. Her hands bled. Yet she endured, because every step through the mansion brought faint echoes of her child's cry. Sometimes, in stolen moments, she peeked into the nursery just to see him sleeping peacefully in the gilded crib. Those glimpses were her fuel, her reason to keep breathing. The boss noticed. He never said it aloud, but his gaze lingered when she soothed her baby, humming lullabies with a voice cracked by exhaustion. He watched from doorways, arms crossed, face unreadable. For a man of cruelty, his eyes held something strange in those moments, something almost human. But that humanity was as fleeting as smoke. For most hours, he barked orders without mercy. Serve the wine. Clean faster. Silence your tears. His words were knives, meant to remind her that she was nothing in his world. And yet one night, everything shifted. She was carrying a tray of glasses through the grand hall when the air split with a sound. Crack. A bullet shattered a vase inches from her head. Screams erupted as chandeliers rattled. She froze, the tray crashing to the floor. Shadows moved across the balcony, figures with guns, faces masked. Assassins. Get down, someone shouted, but her body locked in terror. Another bullet whizzed past, slicing her sleeve. She stumbled, about to fall, when a force slammed into her, knocking her to the ground. Her eyes widened. The Mafia boss himself crouched over her, his arm shielding her from the gunfire. His voice was low, sharp, commanding. Stay behind me. She gasped, trembling beneath him as he drew his weapon with terrifying precision. His men poured into the hall, chaos erupting in flashes of muzzle fire. The boss's eyes blazed with fury as he fired back, his body still angled to shield hers. For the first time, her enemy had saved her life. As the last gunshot echoed and silence fell, she stared at him in disbelief. His hand was still gripping her arm, his chest rising fast. He met her gaze, his face inches from hers, and for a heartbeat, the world stopped. The man who had chained her had just risked his life to keep her alive. Her heart was still pounding when the echoes of gunfire faded. The boss stood tall, barking orders as his men dragged two wounded assassins into the hall. Shards of glass crunched underfoot, the mansion now scarred with bullet holes and bloodstains. He turned to her, his voice sharp but steady. You could have been dead. Next time, listen when I tell you to stay down. She wanted to scream at him, to hurl every ounce of her anger in his face, but the weight of what had just happened pressed against her chest. He had shielded her, taken the bullets meant for her. The contradiction was unbearable. Her captor was also her savior. That night, as the mansion fell into tense silence, she moved quietly through the halls carrying laundry to the servants' quarters. The guards' voices drifted from the study, low and urgent. They're back. The rivals won't stop until he's gone. And if she finds out... Her steps faltered. She pressed herself against the wall, straining to hear. Another voice spoke, hushed but heavy. Her bloodline is cursed. Her father's sins still haunt this house. Her breath caught. Father? What could they mean? He had been an ordinary man, or so she thought, gentle, hard-working, and broken by poverty before his untimely death. Why would the Mafia even know his name? Later, while cleaning the boss's study, her curiosity clawed at her. Papers lay scattered across the desk, ledgers, letters, contracts. One envelope, yellowed with age, bore her father's handwriting. Her trembling hands opened it. The words inside stole the air from her lungs. It was a confession. Years ago, her father had worked under the Mafia empire, trusted, respected, until he betrayed them, selling secrets to their rivals for a handful of desperate cash. His treachery had nearly destroyed the organization, and his disappearance had left wounds that never healed. She staggered back, the letter slipping from her hands. Her world cracked open. The Mafia's cruelty toward her was not random. It was vengeance. She wasn't just a servant repaying a debt. She was the daughter of a traitor. The door creaked open behind her. She froze, her pulse racing. The Mafia Boss stood in the doorway, his eyes locked on the letter at her feet. His voice was cold as steel. "So," he said slowly, stepping closer, "you finally know the truth about your father?" The silence between them was suffocating. She clutched her trembling hands against her apron, the letter still lying on the floor like a weapon. The Mafia Boss stepped forward, his shadow stretching across the room. He picked up the paper, his eyes narrowing as he read the words he had memorized long ago. "Your father was no innocent," he said, his voice low, sharp enough to cut. "He was a traitor who nearly destroyed everything I built. And now you. His blood runs through you." Her chest tightened. "I didn't know," she whispered, desperation lacing every word. "I was just a child. Please, you can't punish me for his sins." But his jaw hardened, a storm raging in his eyes. Compassion flickered there for the briefest moment, but it vanished under an iron mask. Blood never lies, and debt is inherited. From that day, his cruelty deepened. Orders became harsher. Tasks turned impossible. She was denied rest, denied dignity, always reminded that her father's shadow marked her every step. The mansion's staff whispered, wondering why the boss suddenly pushed her beyond her breaking point. And yet, in stolen moments, his gaze betrayed conflict. He would linger as she sang softly to her baby. He would stand silently in the doorway, his fists clenched as if fighting himself. One evening, after another day of endless torment, the storm finally broke. The boss summoned her to the grand hall, his menacing presence seated upon the leather chair, a half-empty glass of whiskey in hand. His lieutenants stood nearby, their eyes cold. A thick folder landed at her feet with a thud. Inside were photographs, her likeness captured from the shadows, envelopes of money passing between strangers, documents stamped with rival insignias. Her blood ran cold. This isn't me," she gasped. But the Mafia Boss's face was unreadable. "My enemies knew of our every move, and now I see why. You were the closest, you had access." Her voice broke, panicked. "No. Someone is framing me. I swear on my child I would never—" The boss slammed his glass onto the table, shattering it into glittering shards. His roar filled the hall. "Do not lie to me. Betrayal runs in your blood, just like your father." Tears burned her eyes as she fell to her knees. Her world spun. She was innocent, yet the evidence wrapped around her like chains. The boss stepped closer, his fury trembling on the edge of violence. He grabbed her chin, forcing her to meet his burning gaze. "If you truly are loyal," he hissed, "then you will prove it. Or I'll take back what you love most, your child." Her knees throbbed from the cold marble floor where she had knelt before him, but there was no time to beg further. Two of his men seized her arms like iron vices, dragging her from the grand hall into the suffocating night. Her cries went unheard. Her baby's faint wail echoed from the upper floors of the mansion, each note ripping through her chest like shards of glass. "Please, don't take me away from my child," she screamed, her voice tearing in the wind. But mercy was a foreign tongue in this empire. The car ride was silent except for the rumble of the engine and the muffled sobs she couldn't control. Her wrists burned from the rope biting into her skin. The men didn't look at her, didn't speak. She was already dead to them. When the vehicle stopped, she was dragged into a warehouse reeking of rust, oil, and blood. A single bulb swung overhead, casting long shadows on concrete walls. Chains clinked with the wind. It was a place where people vanished, where screams dissolved into silence. They shoved her to her knees before a stained wooden post. A gun clicked behind her head. Her heart pounded wildly. The world blurred with tears. She thought of her baby's tiny fingers, the warmth of his cheek. If this was her end, he would never know her love. "Any last words?" one of the men mocked, pressing the barrel harder against her skull. Her lips trembled, but she forced the words out, a whisper into the void. "Please tell my son I loved him." The man's finger curled around the trigger, and then, Stop. The single word froze the room. Heavy footsteps echoed on the concrete, steady, commanding. The Mafia boss emerged from the shadows, his suit immaculate, his expression carved from stone, his gaze locked on her trembling figure. The gunman hesitated. "Boss, you said—" "I said punish betrayal." The boss cut in, his voice as sharp as steel. He strode forward, each step heavy with authority. He stopped beside her, his shadow swallowing hers. His eyes glinted with fire, with something darker than rage. The silence broke with words that cracked like a whip. "She belongs to me," he declared, his tone cold enough to silence every man in the room. "No one touches her. Not unless they want to answer to me." The warehouse froze. The men exchanged uneasy glances. She, kneeling on the floor, lifted her tear-streaked face, confusion warring with terror. What did he mean? Why save her now? The night had betrayed her, but in its darkness, a claim had been made that would change everything. The words still echoed in her ears. "She belongs to me." Even as they untied her and pulled her trembling body from the warehouse floor, her heart couldn't decide if it should beat with relief or terror. She dared not look at the Mafia boss, but she felt his presence, cold, towering, suffocating, as if her soul had been branded with his claim. The men obeyed without question, though unease stirred among them. They had seen him order executions for far less. Why protect a waitress who had brought him nothing but trouble? Back at the mansion, the air turned poisonous. The inner circle gathered in hushed corners, their voices dripping with suspicion. "He's losing his edge," one sneered. "That woman has bewitched him." Another spat. "If the boss grows weak, the empire will crumble. She's the crack in his armor." She could feel their eyes on her wherever she went. Every corridor, every room in the mansion carried the weight of unspoken hatred. She kept her head low, clutching her baby close, praying to remain unseen. But she could not escape his gaze. The Mafia boss lingered in doorways, appeared suddenly in hallways, always watching. His eyes no longer carried only cruelty. There was something else, something she feared even more. Conflict. One evening, as rain lashed against the windows, he summoned her to his study. She stood before his desk, her hands shaking, her child asleep in the nursery above. "Do not mistake what happened last night," he said flatly, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "I saved you because you are mine, nothing more. You will obey me, serve me, and remember your debt. Step out of line again, and even I will not protect you." Her throat tightened. "Why me?" she whispered before she could stop herself. "Why claim me at all?" His jaw clenched, but he gave no answer. Instead, he dismissed her with a wave of his hand, leaving her drowning in confusion. Outside the study door, another set of eyes had watched. His most trusted lieutenant, a man who had bled for him, who had killed at his command, now saw his leader faltering, and he despised the reason why. Later that night, in the smoking room filled with shadows and secrets, the lieutenant leaned close to the others. His voice was low, but it carried venom. "She is the weakness that will destroy him," he said. "If the boss will not cut her out." His hand curled into a fist. "Then I will." The lieutenant's eyes glowed with murderous resolve. "Mark my words. Before long, that woman will vanish from this world. Permanently." The lieutenant's vow lingered like smoke in the mansion's halls. He watched, waited, patient as a viper. When the perfect moment came, he struck, not with bullets or knives, but with a far quieter weapon. That evening, the mansion's dining room glittered with polished silver and soft candlelight. The Mafia boss sat at the head of the long table, his men positioned in silence, while she stood at the far end, pouring wine with trembling hands. She avoided their eyes, aware of every whisper, every darting glance. The lieutenant leaned in, speaking softly to her as she passed his chair. "A toast," he said, offering her a glass already filled. His smile was sharp, almost kind, but the kindness stank of rot. Confused but wary, she hesitated. Refusal was dangerous. Obedience even more so. Under the watchful eyes of the room, she lifted the glass to her lips. The wine was bitter, metallic. A heat burned in her throat, then spread like fire through her chest. Her knees buckled. The glass slipped from her fingers and shattered across the floor. Gasps filled the room as she collapsed, her breaths shallow, her body writhing. Pain clawed through her veins, and darkness threatened to swallow her whole. "Boss, she's—" one of the men stammered. Chairs scraped. The lieutenant rose halfway, feigning alarm. It must be weakness. The girl wasn't strong enough. But his lie crumbled under the weight of his boss's stare. The mafia leader's eyes burned like twin storms as he rose from his seat. He swept past the stunned men, kneeling beside her trembling form. Her lips were pale, her breaths ragged. For the first time, panic flickered across his hardened face. "No," he muttered, lifting her into his arms with surprising gentleness. "Not like this." She felt his heartbeat thunder against her cheek as the world dimmed around her. His voice, usually cruel, unyielding, was raw with urgency. "Get the car," he barked. "Now." The lieutenant's mask tightened, but he obeyed, rage smoldering in his silence. As rain pounded outside, the mafia boss carried her into the night. His suit soaked, his grip unrelenting as if letting go meant losing something he could not name. In the back seat, he pressed her hand to his chest, his words rough, nearly breaking. "Don't you dare die. Do you hear me? Don't." The hospital doors burst open as he stormed inside, his voice echoing like thunder. "Save her. Whatever it costs, she does not die." The hospital corridors buzzed with urgency as nurses rushed her limp body into intensive care. The mafia boss paced like a caged predator, his fists clenched, his jaw tight. His men trailed behind, unsettled by his uncharacteristic agitation. When the doctor finally emerged, sweat on his brow, he hesitated before delivering the news. "She's stable, for now. But there's another matter." The mafia boss's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Speak." The doctor shifted uncomfortably. "Her child. With her condition, child services has been alerted. She owes thousands in unpaid medical bills. Unless someone clears the debt immediately, the boy will be taken into custody." The words struck like a knife. The mafia boss froze, then turned toward the glass window that overlooked the nursery. Tiny cribs lined the room, each holding fragile bundles of life. And among them, her baby. Alone. Vulnerable. For the first time in years, something inside him stirred. Not weakness, not pity. Something far more dangerous. Without hesitation, he pulled out his wallet and tossed a thick bundle of bills onto the counter. "Clear every debt in her name," he ordered coldly. Then his voice dropped to a growl. "If anyone so much as breathes about taking that child, I'll make sure they disappear." The staff scrambled to obey. His reputation made their hands shake as they processed the payment. Hours crawled by. He remained in the chair outside her room, refusing to leave. The dim lights of the ward softened his sharp features, but his eyes never strayed far from the child now cradled in his arms. He held the baby awkwardly at first, unfamiliar with the fragile weight. Yet slowly, his grip steadied. The baby stirred, tiny fingers curling around his finger, anchoring him in a way bullets and blood never had. He sat there, silent, staring at the newborn's innocent face. Memories of his own haunted past clawed at him. Loss, betrayal, the coldness that had shaped him into what he was. He had vowed never to care, never to feel. Yet here he was, protecting the child of a woman he should have destroyed. In the quiet, one of his men whispered, "Boss, the others will see this as weakness." His glare silenced them instantly, then let them choke on their doubts. Inside the room, machines beeped softly. Her breaths steadied, her lashes fluttered. Slowly, painfully, she stirred awake. The first thing her blurred vision captured was not the white ceiling, not the doctor's face, but him. The Mafia Boss, sitting in the chair, black suit rumpled, and in his arms, her baby, safe and cradled like something priceless. Her heart slammed against her ribs as the realization pierced her. She whispered, her voice hoarse but trembling with shock. "Why? Are you holding my child?" Her voice cracked the silence. "Why? Are you holding my child?" He turned his head slowly, his eyes unreadable, though his grip on the baby did not loosen. For a moment no words passed between them, only the soft coo of the infant. Finally his voice came low, rough like gravel. "Because no one else will protect him." Her breath caught. It was absurd. This was the man who had ruined her, who had dragged her into torment. And yet, in that moment, he looked less like the monster who ordered her punishment and more like a man haunted by something he couldn't kill inside himself. "I never asked for your protection," she whispered. He stood, placing the baby gently into her arms. His eyes lingered on the fragile child, then hardened again. "It doesn't matter what you asked. From now on, both of you are under me. That is the only reason you're still breathing." The words were harsh, yet they clashed with his actions. The paid bills, the sleepless vigil, the child cradled in his arms. A contradiction that terrified her more than his cruelty. Days later, when she was strong enough to leave the hospital, he ensured she returned to the mansion. The inner circle simmered with unease, but none dared question him aloud. Still, their whispers cut through every hallway, their hatred fixed on her. To keep her sanity, she took small liberties, walking in the garden, sneaking moments in the city market with her baby. Each outing was brief, watched by his men, but those fleeting hours were her escape from gilded captivity. It was during one such visit, among the chatter of vendors and the smell of spices, that the world shattered. She had bent over a stall, adjusting the blanket wrapped around her child. A hand brushed past her shoulder. At first she thought nothing of it. Then, in a blink, the weight in her arms vanished. Her baby was gone. She spun wildly, her scream ripping through the crowd. "My baby! My baby!" Through the chaos, she caught sight of a figure darting between stalls, a man in a dark coat, clutching her child. He moved with precision, practiced like a predator. The market erupted in confusion, bystanders scattering. She pushed forward, clawing through the crowd, her lungs burning with panic. The man reached a waiting car, its engine already running. She lunged, her fingers grazing the door handle, but the car screeched away, leaving her on her knees in the dust, her cries echoing in the market square. Her baby was gone, stolen by the very enemies bold enough to strike at the Mafia Boss through the only weakness he now possessed. She collapsed in the dust, tears blinding her vision, her chest heaving with broken sobs. The car that had stolen her baby disappeared into the city, swallowed by chaos. People murmured in pity, but none dared move closer, until black SUVs roared into the square, doors flew open. Men in sharp suits and cold eyes leapt out, weapons ready. Then he emerged, the Mafia Boss, his presence heavy as a storm. His gaze swept the scene, locked on her trembling form, then on the direction the car had fled. For the first time, she saw raw fury consume him. His jaw tightened, his fists clenched, and when he spoke, his voice was low, lethal. "They've declared war." Within minutes, the city felt his wrath. Orders were barked into phones, weapons distributed, safe houses burned. Streets that had been ruled by whispers now rang with gunfire and screams. Rivals were dragged from hiding, their allegiances questioned at gunpoint. Blood ran down alleyways as entire blocks lit up in flames. She was taken back to the mansion, but she could not rest. Every gunshot she imagined was the sound of her baby's last breath. Every explosion outside tore at her sanity. Yet through the chaos, one thought pulsed in her mind. This is my fault. If I hadn't gone to the market. Hours passed like years. The city outside became a battlefield. His men struck with ruthless precision, cutting down anyone linked to the rival syndicate. At last, long after nightfall, the mansion gate swung open. His convoy returned, headlights slicing the darkness. She rushed forward, heart pounding, terror and hope colliding inside her chest. The car door opened. He stepped out slowly, and in his arms, her baby. The child whimpered softly, alive. Relief crashed over her, stealing her breath. But then she saw it. His shirt soaked in blood, his hands stained red, his eyes burning like a man who had walked through hell and brought it back with him. He held the baby as if daring the world to try again, as if he'd sacrificed everything in fire and steel to reclaim what was his. Her knees went weak, tears spilling down her face. She reached out, whispering, "Give him to me." But he pulled the baby closer, his voice hoarse yet commanding. "No. After tonight, he's mine." Her hands froze in the air, trembling. His words pierced her heart sharper than any blade. "He's mine." It wasn't just a claim. It was a decree, carved in blood. She should have screamed, should have fought to rip her baby from his arms. But when her eyes met his, something unexpected silenced her. Beneath the fire and cruelty, she glimpsed something raw, a wound, a loneliness carved so deep it made monsters out of men. He turned away, carrying the baby into the mansion as though the child were the only light left in his darkness. She followed, every step heavy with fear and confusion. In the quiet of the nursery, he finally handed the baby back to her, though his gaze never left the child. He lingered at the crib, shoulders stiff as if fighting unseen demons. For a long time, neither spoke. Only the soft breaths of the child filled the room. She dared whisper, "Why? Why are you doing this? You could have left him. You could have killed me." His jaw tightened. For a moment he looked like he might explode, but instead, his voice came low and rough. "Because no one takes from me, and no one takes you." Her heart skipped. The words weren't tender. They were a chain binding her tighter to him. Yet in his eyes, for just a flicker, she saw a man stripped bare. A man who had lost too much and clung to the only thing left that made him feel alive. In that silence, an unspoken bond began to form. Fragile, dangerous. She hated him, feared him, but a part of her heart trembled at the thought that maybe, buried under all the cruelty, he was human after all. The days that followed were strange. He still barked orders, still treated her like a possession, but he never again left the baby out of his sight. Sometimes, late at night, she caught him pacing the halls, guarding the nursery with a gun in hand, as though the child were his redemption and his curse. But whispers began to stir. His men noticed the shift. The air around the mansion thickened with suspicion. Respect began to curdle into doubt. One evening, as she rocked her child to sleep, the heavy doors of the mansion slammed open. His council, the old guard of the Mafia, the men who had built his empire beside him, entered, their faces grave. He stood tall as they surrounded him, their voices sharp with accusation. "You've spilled blood for her, you've bent rules for her, and now you guard her and her brat as if they were your crown." The eldest leaned forward, his words like venom. "Love is weakness, and weakness will destroy you." The room fell into tense silence. His men waited for his reply, but she saw it, the flicker of doubt in his eyes, the first crack in a man who had always been unshakable. The words hung in the air like a curse. Love is weakness. For the first time she saw the boss hesitate, his usual fire dimmed, replaced by a flicker of doubt. The council members exchanged satisfied glances. They had struck the first crack in his armor. But doubt was dangerous in their world, and in the dead of night danger came. The storm began with silence. The mansion's lights cut out, plunging the grand halls into blackness. Then came the footsteps, dozens, maybe hundreds, rushing across marble floors. Gunfire cracked, shouts echoed, and the empire he ruled with iron fists began to crumble from within. Clutching her baby, she froze in terror. The nursery door slammed open. One of his loyal guards dragged her up. "Hide now," They've come for him and for you." Her heart thundered as she ran through the mansion's labyrinth of hallways, the child wailing in her arms. Shadows and bullets danced across the walls. Every corner threatened death. She ducked into a dusty storage room, pressing herself against crates, praying the cries wouldn't give them away. Through a sliver in the door, she saw chaos. Men she had seen at his table, men who had toasted his victories, now raised guns against him. His empire was devouring itself. And then, him, the Mafia Boss. No longer seated on his throne of arrogance, but standing in the middle of the bloodshed like a wolf cornered by his own pack. His gun roared with fury, cutting down traitors one after the other, but there were too many. His men fell around him, loyal blood staining the marble. Her baby's cry pierced the air, and his head snapped toward her hiding place. Even in the madness, he found her, their eyes locked. For a fleeting second, his gaze softened, an unspoken vow that he would protect them even now. He charged forward, carving a path through enemies, closer, closer. But then, a shot rang out. She screamed as the sound ripped the world apart. His body jerked, blood blooming across his white shirt. The Mafia Boss, her captor, her tormentor, her unwanted protector, staggered. Time slowed. He turned his face toward her, lips parting as if to speak. But no words came. His gun slipped from his hand, clattering to the floor. He collapsed, crimson spreading beneath him. The child wailed. She pressed a trembling hand to her mouth, choking back sobs. Around her, the coup still raged, but all she could see was him, bleeding, broken, perhaps dying. As enemies closed in, one of the council leaders sneered over his fallen body and raised his gun toward her. "Now we finish the weakness." The gun barrel glinted inches from her face. Her arms tightened protectively around the baby, her body trembling but defiant. She braced for the shot, when suddenly, a broken voice rasped across the chaos. "Don't touch her." Her heart lurched. The Mafia Boss, blood spilling from his wound, had dragged himself across the floor, one hand pressing desperately to his chest, the other reaching for his gun. The councilman cursed, firing back at loyalists who still fought to protect him. She crawled to him, ignoring the danger, tears blurring her vision. His skin was cold, his breaths shallow. Yet his eyes, those dark, merciless eyes, now burned with something she had never seen before. Regret? "I built all this," he whispered, voice cracking as he coughed blood. "An empire of fear, power, control. But none of it ever made me feel alive." His trembling fingers brushed hers, staining them crimson. "Only you did. You and that child." Her chest ached, torn between fury and pity. "Why are you telling me this now, after everything you did to me? After the pain?" A faint, broken smile touched his lips. "Because death has no lies." Her tears fell onto his face as he gripped her hand with the last of his strength. "If I go down tonight, remember this. I never wanted weakness, but you became my strength." Her baby cried louder, echoing through the room like a curse. The sound drew their enemies closer. Shadows closed in, heavy boots stomping across shattered marble. She clutched the boss's hand tighter, unwilling to let him slip away. Then the world shattered. Rough hands yanked her back, wrenching the baby from her arms. She screamed, fighting with every ounce of strength left in her body. "Let me go! Don't touch him!" The council leader smirked, his face twisted with triumph. He kicked the bleeding Mafia Boss aside like discarded trash. "Your reign is over, and as for her..." His cold eyes slid to her, then the baby. "We've just found the perfect bargaining chips." She thrashed in their grip, her child's cries tearing through her soul. The Mafia Boss coughed, blood pooling around him as his hand reached weakly toward her, powerless to stop what was happening. For the first time, she saw fear in his eyes, not for himself, but for her and their child. The councilman dragged her toward the shattered doors, the baby wailing in their arms. Behind her, the Mafia Boss lay dying in a pool of blood, his desperate gaze locked on her, as if it were the last thing tethering him to life. Her cries echoed through the shattered mansion as the council dragged her away, the baby's wails piercing the night. Behind her, the Mafia Boss lay broken, blood pooling around him. His breaths were ragged, his eyes glassy, yet they never left her. Then, something shifted. With a guttural roar ripped from the depths of survival, he forced his body up. Pain tore through him, but rage and desperation burned hotter than death. One hand fumbled for his fallen gun, the other pressed to his wound. He staggered to his feet, every step leaving a crimson trail. The councilman turned too late. His gun spat fire, bullets tearing through traitors with merciless precision. Screams filled the grand hall as men dropped one by one, their coup crumbling in blood. Those who had sneered at him hours before now begged for mercy. None was given. She froze, clutching her child, unable to look away. He wasn't a man anymore. He was a storm, a devil clawing his way back from death to protect what little he had left. And all that fury, all that carnage, was for her. Finally, silence. Smoke and blood hung in the air. He stood swaying, drenched in red, his chest heaving, his strength nearly gone. Slowly, he limped toward her. Her heart hammered as he stopped before her, his dark eyes soft in a way that unraveled every wall she had built. With shaking hands, he brushed her tear-stained cheek. "You're free now," he rasped, voice breaking. "Take everything I have. My money, my empire. Never live in hunger. Never live in fear again. You'll never bow to anyone, not even me." Her lips trembled, the weight of his words sinking in. He wasn't offering power. He was offering his entire world, his life, his soul, shattered and laid at her feet. Tears blurred her vision. She shook her head, whispering so softly he almost didn't hear. "I don't want your money." Her voice cracked as she clutched the child closer. "I want you." For the first time, his mask broke completely. The ruthless Mafia Boss, feared by all, let out a trembling breath. His eyes glistened with something raw, something human. But then, sirens wailed outside. Red and blue lights washed over the blood-soaked walls. The sound of boots thundered against the broken gates. The police were coming, and there was no escape. He turned his head toward the flashing lights, then back to her, as if memorizing her face for the last time. "Then hold on to me," he whispered, his voice a promise and a plea, as the doors burst open and guns were raised.